thank you very much for having me on your show. I appreciate the opportunity to clear up any misunderstanding we may have had. I want to thank you for listening and hearing me out. And, fuck off. Wait, did you stop already? Yeah, what's the name of the show? Apostasy Now? Okay. Give me 3 seconds. Okay, I'm ready. Hi, this is Emery, and you're listening to Apostasy Now. Well, it was recorded previously, you're listening to it now, but because now is right now, and so that's thanks for the all right. Little Jake Johansson there for you. Yeah. One of the darkest places that we have to go hide is in our own little butt hurt corner. When you put ego out of the way and you put insecurities out of the way, they're two completely different environments to concern yourself with. When you find a way to put those out of the way, and for the record, I don't always, but goddamn do I try, then the community at large, our friends around us, they can help us to become better at what we're trying to achieve. You can find Ardent Atheist at ardentatheist.com. Skeptically Yours is at skepticallyyours.net, because some asshole already has skepticallyyours.com. And you can find me at Emery II on Twitter. And I warn you now, you probably don't want to go there. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Abu. Has anyone done that gag? All right, man. Thanks, brother. Hi, this is Emery, and you're listening to Apostasy Now. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. This week on Apostasy Now, Mr. Diety himself parts the clouds and comes by for a small Skype chat. Smashlock and I were really happy to have him. I met him at the non-conference in Kitchener, Ontario this summer. He's a great guy. If you ever get a chance to meet him, he's very personable. He's down to earth, and he's not afraid to get questions that we pose to him. Well, he's not at all shy about answering any question on pretty much any topic. I found a new respect for him having met him, and especially after our talk, which we managed to rein in at 2 hours, but it could have kept going very easily. And it's going to be broken into a two-part. So his real name is Brian Keith Dalton, for anyone whose head's in the sand and doesn't know him. If you don't know him, definitely take this opportunity and look into more of his work. Everything will be found pretty much under the name Mr. Diety. And with that, let me just say thank you to Brian. I really appreciated it, and I hope to be able to talk to you again soon. Welcome back to another episode of Apostasy Now.
Brian, I know I don't speak up much, and it's really hard for me to talk about my feelings, but...
Why don't we start with someone more interesting?
Because I'm very much a skeptic. I'm more of a skeptic than I am an atheist. I mean, atheist is a conclusion based on my skepticism.
You'll have to come like a little child to the foot of the cross.
That attitude is what is responsible for the rise of atheism.
That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace.
What is the penalty for leaving the Muslim faith? With the death penalty. Thank you.
This is Apostasy Now.
For people to get the information correct before they start yapping.
Get ready to root for the bad guys.
Begins with E, evidence. All the evidence.
Part 1.
My presentation, which I was going to use, which is kind of fun. I mean, I got a lot of cool stuff in the presentation. It wouldn't open up because it was such an old version of Keynote. It was like Keynote 09, and it just wasn't working with the El Capitan thing very well. It would open up, but then it would crash. So I was really at a loss on many levels there. So I'm so glad that you felt I did okay, because I was ready to cut myself again after the speech.
It's just another Robert M. Price interview with me whispering in the background.
Oh, I love Bob. He's so awesome.
Oh, he was a great interview.
Yeah, there's a couple of people when I was at the conference, a couple of names that just tend to float into conversations a lot. Robert M. Price was one. Obviously, people who were speaking were, but I mean, people who weren't there. Robert M. Price, and the other one was Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like, we're a bunch of non-believers, but it's almost like his ghost is still hanging around. He made a real impact.
So, the one thing I've always wanted to ask you is, and I'm sure you've been asked this before, but man, like, did you do stand-up before you started doing your videos, or did that kind of humor just draw itself naturally out of the material that you were using to make your videos?
Yeah, I have not done stand-up. It's something that I would like to do, but quite frankly, I don't have the balls to do that. It's a terrifying proposition, and I have just the utmost respect for anybody who does that. It's an impressive thing. No, my sense of humor is very Woody Allen, Bob Newhart. And when you say Woody, you kind of have to include Bob Hope because he stole everything that he does from Bob Hope. So. And it's more of a natural, I like conversations, and particularly with regard to Mr. Deity, what I liked is the possibility of having conversations that would have theoretically had to take place, like, which evils are we going to allow, and, how do we find somebody to go down and be crucified? Those are that kind of concretizes the whole thing, and it makes it seem as silly as it does once you really start to think about it. That's what the Mr. Deity thing grew out of, is it's just a thing where I just kept thinking, people aren't thinking this through. They aren't taking it to the next step. They think about heaven and wanting an afterlife, but do they think about how they're going to lose their free will, and everyone there is going to have friends and loved ones who are being tortured forever and ever and ever? Is that really going to be an enjoyable place to be for eternity, knowing that your brother or your ex-spouse, who, you may not be too crazy about anymore, but you certainly don't want her tortured forever. That kind of thing. It's just, so much of religion is about someone says something that, boy, that sounds great. But you give it, some time with a few brain cells, and it doesn't seem that great anymore.
No.
So
I remember watching the very first episode that you put out, and it stands out in my mind still to this day as just one of those epic comedy moments. Like, I was holding my ribs by the end of that first episode when I watched it a couple of years ago, and I still remember that feeling.
It's one of my favorites. I really do feel like I nailed that one pretty good. That was a good place. That was a good place to start.
Yeah,
because he's so casual, and you're talking about Holocausts and Down syndrome, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to allow it, and it's just so freaking awful, particularly when you realize really this guy's all powerful and he's all knowing, and he can't do any better than this. That's the saddest thing, is that you have all the power in the world, you have all the knowledge in the world, and this is the best you can do. Yeah. It's just so pathetic. You have to create a planet where sentient beings chase each other down and then kind of torture each other to death and then eat them. Eat each other. It's wow. If that's the best we can hope for, from all powerful and all knowing, but it's not. There's heaven. You can go to heaven, and then you got the question of, well, if he knows who's going to go to heaven in the first place, why not just make everybody in heaven already who was going to end up there, and just don't create all the people who are going to burn in hell forever? That seems like a much more loving, compassionate thing to do, but no, we can't do that. Somehow we have to, for some reason, we have to come to this godforsaken place and suffer first before we do that. It's all so crazy.
It is crazy. And the co-host for that episode was absolutely like a brilliant addition to that. But what I'm curious about is, in your own opinion, like, what has it been like doing that series? Do you get a lot of negative feedback, and do you get a lot of positive feedback? And obviously you still do activity on the internet. So is the positive feedback worth all the negative?
Well, I don't actually get that much negative. The people who watch the show are generally pretty, I guess I've been doing it long enough now to where I've whittled out most of the naysayers. We had a bunch of Christians come on when we released the Richard Dawkins episode because he draws so many people in, and they made a whole bunch of negative comments, but they're also, I'm not bothered by people having different opinions or negative comments regarding what I say. I think it's a starting point for conversation, and I would rather have the conversation than not. So if whatever they're going to say, I'm game and I'm open. And the thing is, I did a video earlier this year where I expressed the basic idea of skepticism. I think for me is, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I want to hear about it. And if you make a better argument or you present evidence that's to the contrary of what I believe, and it's pretty solid, I'll probably change my mind. I mean, that's how I became an atheist in the first place, is I looked into it and I went, oh yeah, well, okay, this makes a lot more sense. So I'm not bothered by it. And the positive feedback is so incredibly positive. I have been meaning for months to make a video just thanking the YouTube commenters, because it's such a thrill for me to put these things up and then just read through the comments, because you realize, first of all, I have an audience that is really bright, sharp, funny, probably good looking as well. I'm thinking good looking. I'm going to throw that in there. And they're just amazing people. And the worst part of the comments for me is that sometimes people will I can't say often and sometimes. Often people will come up with a better ending line for the show than I did, and it kills me. We did one recently called The Apostate, which was about this is a way of the Mr. not a Mr. Deity, where I sit down and I'm having a conversation with a guy and I'm about to join his religion, and he says to me, in the end, if you decide to leave, we will kill you.
Yes.
And then I'm trying to figure out whether that's metaphorical or literal, or because sometimes in the Bible, you get "we will kill you" doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna actually physically kill you. But of course, he explains to me, yes, it's. And the last line in the show was he calls somebody as I've run out the door. I'm getting away from this thing as fast as I can once I understand it. And the guy says, these disclosure laws are killing us. And someone wrote, the end line should have been, these disclosure laws, they're killing us. No, not literally. No, not literally. Should have been the last line. And somebody gave us the best closing in it. And we had 3 people here shooting it, me and the guy, and I had an assistant, a camera assistant, a friend of mine running the camera. And we're all pretty funny people. He teaches comedy improv at a big studio, acting studio here in LA. Matt, the guy who was running the camera, has been through improv, has done stand up and everything. And we all just looked at each other when I said, and how did we not go there? How did we not figure out the last line of that show should have been, no, not literally? That just kills you. It's so devastating. But, once again, funniest people on the planet to me, watching my show makes me feel pretty good. That's great. And they're brilliant. And a lot of times they come to my aid in situations where someone goes after me and then they just tear them to shreds. It's so much fun to have somebody just, taking your back, getting your back and just wreaking havoc and devastation on everybody. It's beautiful.
Well, you must have unlike most people, you have a small taste of what it's like to be in the position of the guy who makes the Star Trek movie or the other fan favorite movie, and then afterwards gets the feedback and is like, it's probably a good idea. We probably could have done that.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and it's you do have people who are very much. At some point, I would love to see like a fan Mr. Deity movie. That would be kind of cool. We're actually I'm actually in talks right now about doing a Mr. Deity movie. Nice. A low budget feature on this, which I think we could sell and probably get our money back. And I have some very a very resourceful producer who thinks he can get a decent amount of money for it. So we will see to shoot it. It would be great. I want to call it Mr. Deity Goes to Hell, but I don't know if that's going to get the title or not.
I'd almost be surprised the type of humor and the way that the people I've seen on your episodes interact with one another. It seems to lend itself very well to kind of sitcom type humor.
Yeah. I mean, it basically is kind of a little mini sitcom. It's kind of a one camera. I don't know that this kind of thing would work in front of a live audience kind of thing. The 4-camera thing I hate anyway. But like a one camera, style show. Like Scrubs or Wonder Years, where there's no live audience or anything like that. I think it lends itself very well to this kind of thing, because what you really want to do is just have these amazing supernatural beings have the conversations that would have had to have been had, or you can imagine being had, about these kind of things that we all take here for granted and are very mundane in our lives.
Was it you that used the term concretize?
Yes.
And you turn something
that's not my term. I didn't make that up, but.
Well, I think I remember you saying that at the conference.
Yeah.
The one of the best ways to really bring something home to someone is to get to walk them through something to the point where they're like, all right, it's a nice idea in abstract, but once you put it into concrete terms in the real world, it suddenly becomes very clear how ridiculous it is.
And I took that from somebody who I heard a speech years and years ago at TAM, where they had studied how to change people's minds. And that was one of the primary ways to change a mind, is to concretize a person's beliefs for them. For instance, you want abortion to be murder. Are you going to lock up a woman for the rest of her life or possibly execute her? She's got 3 other children now that she's having a hard time struggling taking care of. Are you going to take the doctor and this woman and put them away in prison forever, or possibly kill them if you're for the death penalty? Once you start to concretize that, people go, well, I wouldn't necessarily be for that. And it's these things that sound good that, okay, let's take it to the next step. And once you take it to the next step, a lot of people go, yeah, that seems kind of crazy now, doesn't it?
I know a couple times in life already, I'm not even 40 yet, but a couple times in life already I've had it where I have to turn to someone, and I'm not someone who generally defends politicians, but I've turned to somebody more than once already and I've said, look, it's easy for you to criticize. What solutions would you offer in place of what you're criticizing? Because I don't have any offhand.
Right.
So I'd love to hear yours.
That's Donald Trump's entire strategy right now. Just criticize when you get asked what you're going to do. I'm going to make it great. It's going to be greater than you've ever imagined it being. It's going to be so great you're going to be bored by its greatness. How there is nothing whatsoever concrete in anything he says. It's going to be huge. Trust me, it's going to be huge.
Huge. Everybody loves me.
H, by the way. Yeah.
I've never ever imagined in my life that anyone would take him seriously. Like I'm seriously trying to understand how a man who seems so empty-headed has been successful to the point that he's been successful. Like even when he fails, he manages to just bounce back, and he's a moron. I'm sorry, like he's a successful moron, but he's still a moron, and it makes me mad that I'm not rich. Because I'm not. Yeah,
there is a how do I say it? There is a romance amongst the Republicans for stupidity. And I think it does tie in with this whole thing. I think it was last election cycle where Rick Santorum said that President Obama was a snob because he wanted everyone to go to college. And you realize these people hate education. And Rick Santorum came out and said it. We hate education because when people go to big colleges, they end up becoming atheists. And the connection it never is get intelligent, get education, leave your silly religion behind. It's always, oh, that's just a terrible thing. And there's like this, there's a Forrest Gump-like kind of romance that they have about stupid people. I mean, look at Sarah Palin. This is the stupidest woman I have ever sthink in the public eye who's lasted more than 15 minutes.
She is stupendously stupid.
Bill Maher, I think it was last week or the week before, showed a clip of her telling people that when you come to America, you need to learn to speak American. Yes. And the level of stupidity is just epic. And they, these are the people that they gravitate towards. And I think there is a little bit of, that kind of romance for the simple-minded and the simple world that we used to have, where we didn't have all these complex ideas that we had to navigate and negotiate and deal with. And this simpletonness is kind of a romance, that longing for the days of the 50s where everything was okay unless you were black or Latino or gay or, it was good for this small little group of people who were running everything.
I can see Russia from my house.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe an animator out there on YouTube I can just see a perfect animation opportunity, the League of Stupid instead of the League of Justice, and have Donald Trump and all of these Republican characters that seem to have just knocked their head into something.
Well, someone's got to run with that. Listen, that's a great idea. I wish I could animate.
I wish I could animate too, because we sit around and brainstorm ideas about things that we could do for our YouTube channel because we're uploading a lot of our podcasts on there, but it would be nice to get some visual content up as well. But c'est la vie, we don't have we don't have that kind of production value. But
not yet.
Does your fan base though give you a lot, like a little bit more hope in humanity, or is it just kind of like a just a pleasant sense that at least there are some people that are worth breathing air left on the planet while you wait for its eventual demise by meteorite?
Well, yeah, it's not just my fan base. I mean, there is a lot of reason for hope out there. I think much of Europe. I think particularly the northern European countries. I think they're really onto something politically, religion-wise. They pretty much all abandoned religion, and now they kind of have a society where they don't have to. I'm about to make a way of the Mister where I talk about how we call ourselves progressives, or at least I do, and we talk about progress, but really the only thing we've done in the last 400 years is tear down the wall of ignorance that has been built up by centuries and millennia of religious dogma that masqueraded as knowledge. And I think we're finally just getting to a point, in the last 100 years, where we're actually getting to the point where we can actually, we're not necessarily fighting them anymore. And the gay marriage thing is kind of, to me, the peak of that, where that's kind of the last big stumbling block. I want to clarify on that. There are still more, but that's the last big one where even the Christians now have gone out and said, oh, this is no longer a Christian country. We're living in post-Christian America. Holy crap. Hold on to your seats. Put on your seatbelt because it's going to be ugly. Oh, and we're finally now at a point where it's kind of exciting, where we can actually do things just based on, not necessarily drawing them back or breaking down that wall, but we can actually just move forward now, kind of uninhibited and a little more freely, and figure out where we go from here. And it's a nice thing to not, to kind of be living in the day when we're pretty much beyond that. I mean, 50 years ago, I could not have done the Mr. Deity show. There are entire places in the world where there's no way no one could do the Mr. Allah show. There's still most of the world where you couldn't do that.
Well, even
at least where Allah is relevant.
Even Monty Python, I know John Cleese at least has said directly that the reason that they haven't gone after anything to do with Muslims in a hardcore way like they did back in the day with Life of Brian is because they don't want to die.
Right,
exactly. And they'll say straight out that's why.
I've said that as well. People have asked me, why don't you do stuff on Islam? And I say, I want to live. And, I enjoy breathing and eating and my friends and family and all that kind of stuff. It's
leisure activities.
It's terrifying.
Luckily enough, I don't take very good care of myself, so I figure right around 65, when my health begins to fail severely, I'll just open the door right up on Islam, because by then it'll probably get me strung right up, and then it won't really matter. I'll be like, I got months left. What do you do?
Exactly. You get the diagnosis, you go full bore.
So my question to you then would be, with all the progress that's being made, something like the whole Kim Davis scenario still kind of shows me that stupid has some teeth left. So
not much though, because I was pretty excited about that whole thing. I mean, I liked the way it went down. I thought this judge was kind of brilliant. He puts her away and he punishes her, and he says something that was very smart, that fining her would not do it because other people would simply pay it. So she had to pay a price for her stupidity. It wasn't much, but it was something, and it confirmed the rule of law, and it said, we are a secular nation. You don't get to have your religious ideas trample on other people's constitutional rights. And I thought that was beautiful. And then he was equally beautiful by letting her out the day that they were going to have this thing. So this guy is so smart. I don't know who he is, but I love him. And he's George Bush appointed, on top of everything else. So I think the guy's kind of brilliant. And I think, it has teeth, but it's baby teeth, and they are about to fall out. I mean, this is the best they can do now. Right. This is the best they can do. They can get some twit woman put away for a few days and then try to get a big rally out, and the fact that they used Eye of the Tiger and Survivor was pissed off about it, it's like, boy, they just can't get anything done right anymore or well. They are grasping. We are witnessing the dying breaths of Christianity's power in America.
That's right, my secular friends. This whole thing has been nothing but win for us. And it's time to savor it. After years and years of secularists like myself screaming that America is not a Christian nation, the Christians themselves have now finally given in on this one. My old buddy, Judeo-Christian apologist Dennis Prager, declared the formal end to Judeo-Christian America. In Time magazine, an Orthodox Christian accepted that he is now living in a culturally post-Christian America. Did you hear that? Post-Christian America. Have there ever been more beautiful words spoken? Now, while I have to admit to hating Christianity, I also want people to know that I love the Christians. So in that love the Christians and hate the Christianity vein, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our Christian friends to post-Christian America with a few tips on how to behave in a secular, pluralist democracy, since they clearly don't seem to have a clue.
It's coming to a close, and I do think I have really changed my opinion on a few things. And the two most important things I think that I've really changed my opinion on in the last year is we need to get In God We Trust off the money and Under God out of the pledge, because they're just little things that people can point to say, oh, look, we're a God-fearing Christian nation, when we all know, those of us on this side, those things came about long after the founding of this country and have much more to do with the Red Menace and or the Civil War and stuff like that. So
you feel now you do want to get rid of them as of before you didn't?
Yeah, I want to push. I think we need to push now and really take our country back. I know that's a horrible motto to use, but this country started out as a rejection of canon law and the Christian nations of Europe. And that's what we need to make clear again, is that this country rejected that stuff. That we didn't found this country so that we could have more religious bullshit like they had in Europe. The people who were over here were here because they saw what Christianity had done to Europe, and it was a hellhole. And they just wanted to be free to live their lives and think what they wanted to think and say what they wanted to say. And you can't do that with a Bible-based religion, because that book does not in any way advocate democracy. The first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights are such a rejection of canon law, particularly what the Catholics are doing, and the Inquisition, and search and seizure laws, and cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, you can just line up canon law and the Bill of Rights, and you see, okay, this is a rejection of everything here. So I think we kind of grab that back and make that clear to everybody.
If more of these people that keep talking about how we're built as well, in our case it's Canada, but in your case the United States, right. Well, we get that sometimes up here as well.
Yeah.
But specific to the United States, we hear all the time, we're a Christian nation. They want the 10 Commandments up at pretty much every building.
Right.
These people have clearly been not educated in the history of the Enlightenment.
Yeah, not at all. They
have no idea what it is.
They don't know. John Locke, is he the locksmith that's going to, I think some guy ran around in a truck opening people's doors.
That's the character off Lost, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. There's an excellent book I wish everyone would read, and I try to promote it at every chance I get. It's such a good book, and he's my favorite science writer. It's called The Science of Democracy by Timothy Ferris, who wrote The Big Shebang and Coming of Age in the Milky Way. Really, really just his prose alone is worth reading, but his ideas are fantastic. And this book, The Science of Democracy, is so incredibly good. And I wish everyone would read it and understand, because he really lays out the case for how democracy, and liberal democracy in particular, and this kind of thing that we came up with here in both America and Canada, it really is an outgrowth of the values and attitudes inspired by science and what you have to do to be good at science. You have to have an open society. You can't have a closed society. You have to be open to change. There's a great quote at the that's within the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., where Thomas Jefferson talks about the importance of being open to change.
Yeah.
And it's just, you look at conservatism, and the very idea behind conservatism is, let's lock this sucker down right here.
Yeah. No changes
it's
ever.
Good as it is. It's really good, and we've got, and that's exactly what the holy books are. The holy books are, okay, this is it. We don't change because we have an all-knowing, transcendent being telling us what's good and right, and he would know if this weren't going to be good 2,000 years from now, so we're locking it down. And the book points out just how much of what we value in these liberal democracies in the West is all about the scientific endeavor and attitude and values.
My background is Mennonite. I know yours is Mormon.
Yeah, there we go.
There are some similarities there.
Yeah, there's some hardcore stuff going on.
One of the things that you just mentioned about being open to change and not trying to have a closed-off society.
Yeah.
Mennonites are definitely an example I've used of the horrors of that plenty of times.
Yeah.
Because people will drive by a Mennonite, like the old colony ones, if they're still living an old-fashioned way, and they'll think, isn't that quaint? Isn't that cute? I had this comment a number of times, and I'm like, for you, because you get to drive by and see it. You weren't raised in it. It wasn't forced on you.
Right.
If you decide to change, you don't get, shunned by your community. And people have no idea, really, in this day and age. Most people don't know what that's like, that the pain that causes people.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I got a little bit of that when I left my mission, because I was going on a Mormon mission. And I came back because I got a record contract. And boy, I didn't realize that's just not something you do. And when I came back, it was the great shunning.
Wow.
What would that be? 1994 or 1984. Yeah, it was that kind of stuff. Is people don't realize how brutal that kind of thing can be to a person.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I had one of my uncles. He's still a Christian. He's in his 70s now. But I would hear these stories growing up because my family was modernized. The education for my parents wasn't quite what most people are. But they fully embraced cars. My dad was a Ford worker on the assembly line, all this kind of stuff, right? So it started really with my great-grandparents a little bit, and then slowly over a few generations moved out. But I know my Uncle John, for instance, he told me at some point he decided that to an old colony church, just to give you a kind of a visual, when he started learning more about what most Christians these days think of as like a modern idea of Christianity, he decided to bring his Bible with him to church. And with Old Colony Mennonites, there is some variance between different sort of sects of them or whatever. But
yes, of course.
If you bring your Bible, you're challenging the minister. You're not allowed to do it.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And by the way, women are not allowed to read it, or else they call them crazy, because reading the Bible will drive them insane.
Yes, of course.
Yes, the Holy Bible will drive you mad.
Yeah.
But he brought his Bible, and he was escorted out of the building and was never allowed back. Just talk about a different planet.
Yeah, that's insane. That's like that reminds me of the old days where you weren't allowed to possess a Bible. You couldn't, particularly one written in the vernacular. Maybe one written in Latin, but if you get something in the vernacular, my God, you're in trouble. You're going to lose your life. People don't realize that that kind of thing went on all the time.
Now you live out in California?
I do. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses out there?
We have a fair amount. Yeah, we get them coming to the door fairly frequently. I used to have a really good play in that I would bring my daughter to the door and show them how wonderful she is and everything, and then tell them that her life was saved by 3 blood transfusions when she was about a week old. So go away. Go away.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. See, that's the one thing. Like, I mean, I remember I used to have a young couple. They were probably about 5 years younger than me, and they would come over to my house, and I had this, I don't know, thought in my head that I could engage them and make a point and perhaps teach them the error of their ways. This is when I was a little younger myself, and I'm a little wiser now.
Right.
And I told them, I said, I'm not going to join your religion, no matter how many times you come by. You're always welcome. I like talking to you, but your blood transfusion thing, there's a website that I gave them, and I said, this is a website that you should look at. This is every child that has died while in the care of Jehovah's Witness parents or caregivers. That were refused full or whole blood transfusions or blood transfusions, partial blood transfusions that would have saved their lives.
Right.
And it was like a list at the time. I think there was like 1,000 names on it.
Yeah.
And that's when I found out, because they kept bringing these religious pamphlets over that were like refuting evolution or certain scientific principles. And they said, oh, read this, read this, read this. You like science, read this. And then I would look up the sources, because that's what I do.
Right.
And I'm like, the guy who wrote this, he's a script writer. Like he writes television and commercial scripts. He doesn't have a background in science.
Right.
And they're like, oh, okay, well, how about this? Read this one. And then I would read it, and inevitably it would be somebody with no scientific background. I think the closest they got to a scientist was a doctor who was a dentist.
Yeah, I was going to say chiropractor.
Yeah. and this kept happening. So eventually what I did is I wrote a refutation of the one that they gave me about evolution, and I handed it to them, and I actually spent like a week writing it on my computer. And when I went to hand it to them, they said, we're not allowed to read apostate literature.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I've never been a part of your religion. I'm not an apostate, but apparently I didn't know what that meant back then.
Right.
And they're literally forbidden from reading anything that comes from an outside source that's not approved by the church. And to me, that was mind-blowing.
Yeah, Mormons do that as well. It's not forbidden per se, but you are on shaky ground, and they'll be watching you if you're reading stuff that's not from, about the religion that's not from official sources. So, yeah, these people try to close the gates. They get everyone in, and then they close the gates behind them, and then they don't allow them to look around the city to see what's going on. It's crazy.
I went to university, which is the beginning of the end of my religious beliefs.
Yes.
But it took a number of years for me to work out all the magical thinking and fuzzies.
Rick Santorum was right, by the way. Look at that. See,
yeah. Well, I went to school for theater, so it double fast for me. One of the main things for me was my conscience. It bothered me. I was surrounded by a higher level, a higher density of gay people in the theater department.
Right.
And every now and then the conversation would come up with people I really liked that normally I had no problems with. And then the conversation would come up about being gay, whether it was a sin or not. And I'd have to say the Bible says it's a sin. And I'd feel like shit.
Right.
So that was the impetus for me to start really, I thought I should check this out. I should really see if this stuff is something that I can force on other people or push on other people in a negative way. It really should hold up, and it clearly did not.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I was so vocal about supporting marriage equality and gay and lesbian, LGBTQ causes in general, because I do think, I got to say, first off, it's just the right and moral thing to do. But on top of that, I think the benefits to our community are going to be huge, because the religious put so many eggs in this anti-gay basket. We've never seen them this invested in anything. And now that it's kind of no big whoop anymore, they've lost so much credibility in terms of being able to talk about what's good and right and moral. And I think that's probably the most important thing we can do, is just to get people to realize this is not a moral, religion and morality have nothing whatsoever to do with each other.
So one of the things that Dragonbeard and I talk about on our show with pretty high levels of frequency is a community of people who call themselves progressives, but are kind of called social justice warriors pejoratively. And
yes.
My question to you is that, do you think that the pendulum is starting to swing the other way a bit much, that they seem to be just as restrictive on what is considered free and open discourse as the religious communities were back when they had some sort of force or power? Because that's the impression I'm getting.
Yes, I am not a fan of, I do very much consider myself a progressive, and I am very much concerned about social justice, but I do not like first of all, I think this whole, media, new media shaming thing is obnoxious and childish, and that first of all, that everyone imagines that we're all going to agree. That one of my biggest problems with this kind of thing is that, if I agree with or disagree with Richard Dawkins on a thing, that's he and I disagreeing. It doesn't mean he's an asshole. It doesn't mean, and I know someone's got to get control of his Twitter feed, because he's he frequently does himself no good. But
maybe someone has taken over his Twitter feed. Maybe that's what's happening.
Exactly. But this desire to completely write people off who have who have decades of history of doing good things, of pushing knowledge forward, of calling into question stupid religious ideas that have been haunting us for centuries. Look at the totality of the person and what they've done, and we should just be able to say, there were all kinds of things that I disagreed with Christopher Hitchens about, the Iraq War being one of the biggest. But okay, I disagree with him on that. And this knee-jerk reaction, this reactionary reaction, really, to label someone else an enemy or almost an apostate kind of thing for not speaking. Bill Maher is, forget that you agree with him on 98% of everything. If he says this in a certain way, and it's even worse for people like him because he's a comedian and he goes a little further than he might just talking about it normally, then you have to write him off and call him an asshole and blah, 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 blah. Let's just agree to disagree, people. You can like a person without having to agree with everything they say. I mean, we are all individuals, as Brian pointed out, and of course we all now say in unison, we are all individuals.
Yes. Which, by the way, is John Cleese's favorite joke, apparently, of all the stuff they did.
It's one of my all-time favorite bits ever. When they yelled that back, I saw that movie in a theater a zillion times because the drummer in our band worked at a local theater, and we got to go in and see that. And I saw that movie probably 25 times in the theater. Nice. And that moment when they yelled back, yes, we are all individuals. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard ever in theater since. And I was only like 14 years old when I saw that. I totally got how funny that was. And I'm kind of proud of myself for being 14 and getting that. But my other favorite from that movie is he's been taken up. He's been taken up. Now there he is. They're all looking to the skies like he's ascended to heaven on a horse. And no, there he is. He's just over there running away, holding his shoe in his gourd. I don't remember what we were saying. Oh, yeah, just, we're not all going to agree. And there is a totalitarian kind of bent towards people who are not really free thinkers. They lean towards the totalitarian. And that's a temptation and an urge that I do think we have to be very well aware of. And again, this is again another place where the values of science and skepticism mean so much to me, because there is a humility in science and skepticism that says, we don't know. And this thing that sounds stupid that this guy's saying today may be right. And let's hear it out. And also, the other thing that I really loathe is anyone who knows anything about free speech knows that the best thing to do is not to shut it down. The best thing to do is argue back with good arguments, not with, right, oh, what an asshole, or, fuck this guy, or blah, 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 blah. The best argument is just to come at them with reason and, don't turn into an asshole yourself. You can't fight assholism with assholism. That's basically, I just came up with that. You guys can use
It's kind of like fighting fire with fire, only asshole with assholism is a defeating cause.
Yes.
Well, I guess it would depend on the type of venue you have to have a conversation, because I know that myself, I've been fairly asshole-ish because we don't really get to engage with people we talk about with very often.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been things that you said that I've been like, well, fuck that,
Right.
And I've said it on our show, and now I feel like I have to own up to being an asshole. So,
I don't think, have you ever said anything about Mr. Deedy?
Yeah, I did.
I don't remember that. But yeah, what you're talking about disagreeing, I'll tell you, this is a little side tangent. I did say something negative about you on our show. About your opinion. It wasn't actually, I don't think, about you. I think it was your opinion. And I put it at the intro of a show. I think it was Justin Vacula was on our show, because he told his followers, go to minute 10 of the show, because that's where my interview starts. In other words, skip over the rant. Skip over the intro rant that Mr. Dragonbeard put on there.
It's funny.
Yeah, but you know what? Actually,
and I don't mind people disagreeing with me. I just, I'm not so thin-skinned, and I don't.
Yeah, I get that sense about you.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you and I disagree, and now let's just go back to being friends.
That point kind of came home to me, though, when I met you. Like I say, I was impressed by the way you connect with people. And I thought to especially when it came up to you, I said, hey, would you go on our show? And you're like, sure. You weren't like, well, I don't know. You're just like, yeah, go ahead, send me an email. I thought, well, when I had this little issue with him, why didn't I try sending him a message to see if he'd engage at least before I shot my mouth off? I think
well, that is a very good point. Yeah.
So from now on, I'm going to try and catch myself, because already on Facebook and Twitter, I do sometimes put it down for 10 minutes if I get really upset before I send that return volley. And I've never regretted that.
Yeah, like this is a learning curve for us because we're just a couple of schmucks trying to do this kind of on the side, right? Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. But having been able to speak to you in person and kind of hear your a more detailed layout of how you see certain things, it's pretty good to admit these things. Yeah, I was an ass. Whatever.
You gotta see him at a conference too.
You know what's weird is I've actually been wrong from time to time too. So.
A lot of people who watched my atheist fundamentalist video or read the ebook completely missed the irony of me calling myself a fundamentalist. One of the points of that video, and it was subtle, so I'm going to be very forgiving on this, was that there really is nothing in any way frightening for atheist or even anti-theist to be fundamentalist about. As noted, atheist and anti-theist like myself don't have a book that requires us to accept on nothing more than faith ideas like genocide can be a good thing, or homosexuals really do deserve to die, or that unmarried woman down the street having sex with her live-in lover should be taken to the center of town and stoned to death. Even the claim that atheists like myself are dogmatically, in other words mindlessly, opposed to God and religion doesn't quite fit the bill. Obviously, I can't speak for every atheist or anti-theist, but my opposition to the God of Abraham is based not on faith or emotion or desire or being brainwashed in my early formative years as religion frequently is. It's based on evidence and or a lack thereof. As a person deeply committed to the primacy and superiority of evidence, I remain open to any and all evidence for God and or religion. And that fact alone makes it impossible for me to be the kind of fundamentalist we generally think of when using that most frightening of F words. This really is what separates people like me who base their lives and thinking on evidence from the religious who proudly base their lives and thinking on faith. And I can state this principle very simply. If I am wrong, I want to know. And if you can show me how and where I'm wrong, I will change my mind. That's how I became an atheist in the first place. The difference between us really is that simple. For instance, if you can show me evidence that millions of Jews lived as slaves in Egypt for hundreds of years, left and wandered for 40 years in the Sinai, I will think again about the Exodus story. Christians, if 3 or more of you can gather together and end world hunger by asking Jesus, who said he would give you anything you ask in such circumstances, I will absolutely reconsider Christianity. I'll also accept moving a mountain, uprooting trees, or raising people from the dead, as these are all things Jesus said believers with just the slightest bit of faith would be able to do.
So, I can't remember.
And I'm aware of it. And so I don't expect everyone to agree with me, and I don't expect everyone to. What I'd like to see is just everyone be able to disagree in a polite and respectful manner, until the point where the other person's being a complete ass, and then you can just say you're being a complete ass. But I always try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I grew up with this kid named Guy Larson who taught me one of the best lessons of my life, because you could not insult this guy. Whatever you said to him, he would laugh. And it was funny to him that you were coming up with these horrible insults. And he was unassailable. And it was I don't know where he learned that. He was just a kid. But I remember thinking, this is the most freaking brilliant thing I've ever seen in my life. And I have a rule for myself, never take anything personally, even if they intend it to be personal, because there's just no benefit to it. There's no upside to it. So just imagine people said that with the best of intentions, and they're angry or they're upset or they have a personal, reason for feeling the way that they do, and take it in stride and just move on.
I was just talking to actually my first interaction with Dr. Richard Carrier online, and some people were going back and forth, kind of barbed on Twitter, and so I didn't get involved in what they're actually debating about, but I just said, because he was coming across as really tight ass. That's the only way I can put it. That's the way he was coming across, and that's why they kept piling on, I think. Or at least he should have walked away. So I just said, you know, don't you think that maybe if you just showed a little humor, it would help to redirect some of their attention towards your work or other things rather than the back and forth you're having? Because he didn't seem to be enjoying it, and he was, I think, blocking people as well.
Right.
So I was discussing this later with a couple of people. And so this is where the idea came from. When I was in university, I have these university stories. When I was in university, yes. I had a friend. I was still Christian at the time. He was Catholic, so Christian from a different sort or whatever. But we often would talk about different issues on campus. One of the things that started happening was he was in the theater department. He used to shave his legs. He always looked really good, really well-coordinated wardrobe. He loved Walt Disney, had pictures of Walt Disney. So everyone started saying he was gay. Now, he was insistent that he was not. And I never took a side on it, except that if he says he's not gay, you know, I'm just going to accept what he's telling me.
Right.
But it was, for the first year he was there, he came my second year, and he was getting really upset about it. It was really, really messing with him. So I finally said, look, John, I'm going to suggest that something you're not going to like, but why don't you try laughing with them? Why don't you start taking an initiative in making the jokes?
Right.
He thought I was nuts, but he started doing it, and they stopped almost immediately.
Right.
It was no longer fun for them, right?
It took all the wind out of their sails.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a number of strategies you can use instead of just getting really kind of having a meltdown.
Well, just being willing to laugh at yourself and not take yourself so seriously just goes that goes a long way. Defensiveness to me is always it's screaming, I'm wrong and I know it. You know, I mean, the second you get defensive on anything, and I mean, you can defend your position, but there's a difference between defending your position and being defensive. And the second I see it, I know instantly, okay, this guy knows, or gal, you know, that they've screwed the pooch, and they just don't want to be publicly called out on it. And, you know, that, to me, that's one of the beauties of science. I remember a story years and years ago about, this guy he thought he'd found the first exoplanet, and he published the whole thing and everything. And there was this conference, and he was going to it. And before he went to the conference, he recrunched the numbers and realized that he'd made a fundamental error.
Oh no.
And he had not in fact discovered this thing. And I think he was getting an award and everything. And the man went to the conference and fessed up and told everyone he'd made an error, that his calculations were wrong, and he got a standing O.
Yeah.
This is something that doesn't happen in religion. It doesn't happen in totalitarian ideology. You say you're wrong, you admit to being wrong, and you just come out as honest. You know, even when there's all these accolades coming your way. The guy's one of my heroes. I can't remember his name, but I thought that's just amazing.
Yeah,
you know,
that is incredible.
He is. He's going up there and he's just going to say I was wrong, and the crowd so values it that they get up and they give him a standing ovation. It's such a beautiful story.
The more religious you are, it could be argued the more opposite of that it would be.
Yes, I think that's very much true. Yeah.
You can never admit
double down.
Error.
Double down.
Yeah, double down. No, you got the numbers wrong, not me. You're like, it's so disingenuous sometimes. All the time.
Yeah. This is the danger of believing in a perfect, all-knowing being. Because once you presume that about your God, nothing can be wrong. And the crazy thing to me is how much they ignore everything he said that's clearly, obviously now wrong and not good and not moral. They don't want to go out and kill homosexuals. Well, some of them probably do. But for the most part, they're willing to abandon that. But if you say something else is wrong further down the line, then they're like, oh my God. What are you talking about? You infidel. Well, why aren't you killing homosexuals? Well, that clearly was, you know, for a certain time and for a certain
It was figurative, not literal.
We're going to interpret that away, you know, which I love, the interpreting of stuff away. They have an objective morality, but they're going to interpret what's right and wrong now in the future. Yeah, that's
they're not picking and choosing. The Lord's telling them. The Lord's picking and choosing.
Yeah.
The first rule of Kill an Infidel Club is you don't talk about Kill the Infidels Club.
Right.
You know, and it's funny that we kind of talk about this with a little bit of jest in there that, you know, religious individuals will double down on bad ideas and bad ideology. Yes. But, you know, the same holds true for any bad ideology. It doesn't have to be a religious one. It's political too. Look, like going back to your Sarah Palin example, no matter how many times you showed that this was a vapid, empty-headed moron, you know, they were like, you're just being sexist because she's a woman. No, you're being an idiot right now defending this person who happens to be a woman who's got nothing between her ears but hot air. And it's political, it's social, it's economic, you know, any bad ideology that you hold to that people throw evidence at you like they're just trying.
You feel threatened by Palin, don't you?
Me? No, yeah. I feel threatened by her.
Well, you know, that is the thing. I mean, we mentioned this in Mr. Deity and the Good back in season 2, that ideology really is, that is the core of so much of the evil that has occurred in history, whether it's religious ideology or secular ideology like communism or Nazism or something like this. It's this idea that this is the way, this is the only way. And, you know, what we learn more and more from science is that diversity is valuable at every freaking level. But, you know, you can't tell people that who think that they have the one and only way and they've found the magic pill, you know, and that's what it really is. It's a one size fits all kind of way of thinking, whether it's communism or religion. And it's one of the most dangerous things humans have ever come up with.
Yeah.
Second only to you're saved solely by faith, and what you do, it doesn't matter. That's, to me, is the most dangerous idea ever. Second is we have a one size all fits all solution.
Yeah. You know, the one thing that bugs me about any ideology, though, is that it seems like a complete surrender of your higher faculties. Like you basically hand over your decision-making power, and you're saying, I don't want to think about what's moral. I don't want to think about what's right. I don't want to think about what's true. I don't want to consider your philosophy. I have been given my operating system instructions, and I'm going to run with this, and I'm going to defend this because it's just easier than having to think. It is so lazy.
Right. Yeah, it really is. It really is ideology 1.0. They never move beyond the 1.0. You know, there's no 1.1 or 2.0 or 51.
Oh, they're still in beta development.
Yes, exactly.
One of the things, like you mentioned the term totalitarian. One of the things I've really been going into on and off over the last year and a half is Christopher Hitchens, and the way this. I think a lot of people kind of miss certain elements of what he was about, and one of them really is the focus on that. The idea that he hated religion as a standalone issue, like it floated out nebulously, is, I think, really misinformed about him. And it robs anyone who's listening to him of the full impact of why he's saying what he's saying. The idea for him was that God is the ultimate totalitarian.
Right.
He knows your thoughts, he knows your feelings, and he got this by extension. From his appreciated Orwell. He used to talk about Orwell a lot. And if you watch these types of thinking, it always deteriorates into this type of, we need to control other people. We need to control everything.
Right. Control is very big in humanity, period. But in religion, there's nothing that comes close. It really is all about, you know, and to a certain extent, one has to say, you know, if we were going back 4,000 years ago, living in a savage world, you know, I get the idea. I get the potential benefits. There's, you know, it's all very easy for us to say now, you know, yes, it makes sense to drop this ideology, but you know, this is where I'm even willing to give a little and say, okay, I get it. I mean, Dan Dennett's book, I think, is brilliant in, you know, breaking the spell and kind of understanding where this all came from and why it worked to the extent that it did, and maybe why it's no longer valuable in the modern societies that we have. I think that's the case. But yeah, control would have been a huge factor when you're out there, you know, facing the other tribe who wants to kill you and take all your shit. Cohesiveness, some kind of cohesiveness, and we're special and we're God's chosen and we're going to kick the shit out of them before they kick the shit out of us was probably a good survival strategy. But we're not, you know, it's again, where's the 2.0? where is the, God 2011 kind of thing? It never moves beyond the gold master. You know what I mean? It's just always, and that's where it becomes problematic, because we do best when we evaluate our circumstances, look at the new environment that we're in, and accommodate and what am I trying to say? Not accommodate. What is the word that I'm looking for? God, all of a sudden I've hit a wall.
Where's your thesaurus?
This medicine does mess with my memory, so I'm gonna call on that. But we adapt. That's what I was trying to say. You adapt to now what's the best way to do it, and that's the other thing that I love, is that science is just pretty much all about, what's the best way to do something? How can we do this more efficiently at lower costs, with a lower cost to whomever might be harmed by it? There's so much about just what works. It's a very pragmatic kind of way to live your life. In fact, I call my form of atheism pragmatic atheism, or practical atheism, because the series that I'm about to do, called The God Distraction, is all about the call to apatheism, which the subtitle for my series is, I don't care if God exists and neither should you. Because once you get into it, once you start to realize how little we know, but how little we could possibly know about an all-knowing, all-powerful super being, it just makes the whole proposition so ridiculous. And once you include the supernatural in, you start to realize that anything is possible. And so who's to say? I stopped one of the guys that I was debating online with. He and I became friends. He's a preacher in England. With once you get you can posit in a supernatural world that there really was a Jesus. He really did rise from the dead. Every bit of that is true. But he was Satan's man, not God. Yes. And he was put down here to create thousands of years of strife and war and murder and torture and all of those things. And how do you say that's not the case? Well, the only reason you would say it's not the case is because you don't want to believe it's so. That's it. That's the only argument for that. Well, God wouldn't allow this. Well, how do you know? He's a supernatural being. He doesn't think the way we do. Nothing needs to make sense to him the way it makes sense to us. Your thoughts are not our thoughts. That kind of thing.
Well, one of the quickest ways also to make atheists is to get them to look into, if you can get them to actually go to study the history of the Bible, the actual manuscript is an effective way.
Just read it.
Yeah. Well, I know I've listened to a number of guys, not just Robert M. Price. There's a couple of them, what's his name? Bart Ehrman is another one.
Yeah.
People who had faith, and then they learned about the literal historical manuscripts, the things you can actually put in your hands and study. And once they learned that, they realized there was just no possible way that this was what they were told it was, inspired by God, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, people don't know that the Gospels aren't written by anyone who had any association with this possible being who may not have even existed. There's questions about that, and I think very good questions.
Is there any key to the solution of this monstrous scheme? Will Batman really be skeletonized and Robin waxed and then notched? Keep keen-edged, keen-witted, and keep watching. Tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel.